Aston Villa are potential title contenders, beating Manchester City and Arsenal within the same week. Ollie Watkins, John McGinn, Leon Bailey are amongst the best players in the Premier League right now, and it's no coincidence this is done under a manager like Unai Emery. Villa have caught their opponents offside 74 times this season with an elite high line from Unai Emery. So Zach, would you agree with my statement that Aston Villa can be potential title contenders?
Well, personally, I don't think they will, because their squad isn't deep enough. That is the main issue. If they were to suffer injuries to the likes of John McGinn, Ollie Watkins, Douglas Luiz, and say these players were out for a couple of months, I think they would really struggle. Because when you look at Arsenal, City and Liverpool starting 11, yes, it is better, but it's not substantially better. But then when you look at the bench and the whole squad, you really see where the quality lies. Liverpool have so many quality attackers they can bring on. City have so many quality defenders they can bring on. And Arsenal have an abundance of options on the bench to bring on and change the game. And yes, Villa do, to an extent. Like, if they start Diaby, they can bring on Leon Bailey. Or if they start Bailey, they can bring on Diaby. But when you look at their squad compared to the other three, it's just not on the same level. And especially with Conference League coming on later in the season, if they don't want to go deep in that and win it, will they have the quality on their bench to rotate and still maintain that form that we're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I would not disagree with that. I mean, if Aston Villa do get an injury crisis like a Tottenham or Newcastle, you've seen how them two teams have fallen off. And with this highland that Aston Villa do play, there's a lot of energy involved. You have to have a very energetic team, and the Conference League and injuries can take that out of players. We've seen that with Newcastle.
And Tottenham.
And Tottenham as well, exactly. So that's the thing, like, I do get that, but what I would say is Aston Villa have had injuries at the moment. They've got the likes of Emil Buendia and Tyrone Mings out at the moment, and they've still got suitable replacements for them. They've got the likes of Diaby, Bailey obviously starting, but he has come off the bench at times. They've got decent players coming off the bench.
They have, but do you not think, like with Tyrone Mings, I know they've got Diego Carlos, Ezri Konsa, and Pau Torres at the back, but do you not think it's not... Like, if they were to suffer an injury to Watkins or McGinn or Douglas Luiz, if you look beyond that, there isn't really the same sort of depth. In centre-back, they've got a few good centre-backs which can cover when Mings isn't there.
Yeah.
And with Buendia in attack, he's not maybe as pivotal as the others, so they're not feeling the effects
No,
as
that's
much.
true. Aston Villa do have a lot of crucial players still playing and fit for them at the moment. But I do feel like they could have a season sort of like a Newcastle last year, where I think they definitely can finish fourth. I think there's 100% chance
I think they could
finish
finish top four.
And I think title contenders is definitely a potential card, because I just think that with the momentum that they have, if they don't get these injuries, which there's a good chance that they might not, I mean, obviously there's a chance that they could, but there's definitely a chance, like Newcastle last year, where they didn't suffer many injuries, and Newcastle obviously seeing the effects of that now. And I think Villa maybe could have a season like that where they get quite fortunate with the lack of injuries. The Conference League will take energy out of them towards the latter stages of the season, and that's the only thing that I do think is stopping them from being up there, like right up there in terms of like title contending. I'm not saying they're going to win the title when I do say that. I think they could just be a team to look out for, perhaps a team that, are on the cards, like perhaps like not finishing third, but they're not far off. Like, yeah, you got to look out for them. Like the likes of Arsenal, City, and Liverpool will be focused on each other, but Aston Villa aren't no pushover, and
they can be the best of the rest.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And that's why I do think they can finish fourth. I think they got the best squad out of the best as well. I think
better than Newcastle's.
Yeah.
What? Because Newcastle have their current injury crisis, or do you think whenever it's fit, do you still reckon they have a better squad?
Yeah, I do.
Really?
As well. Yeah, I think Aston Villa got.
I think that's a debate. I don't know. I think Newcastle might have a slight better squad.
I think when you look at Aston Villa's bench, I just would prefer that over even a full fit Newcastle's bench. But
really?
Newcastle, yes, and also as well, Newcastle do have a lot of injury-prone players. Callum Wilson isn't one you want to rely on when when you've got a season coming up. You don't want to rely on Callum Wilson going off your bench because he's going to get injured, and a lot of Newcastle players are out for quite a significant amount of time. And Villa, I do think they will get fortunate with the lack of injuries. I just have a sort of that feeling. It's not really a calculated estimate. It's just sort of a guess.
When things going right for a team,
I feel like
it's just clicking.
The momentum just will carry them through. And the only thing that would stop them, because you've got the likes of Matty Cash coming off the bench, coming on that right back, and that is just fantastic depth.
And it offers a different
even
dynamic.
Newcastle don't have a depth like that. Exactly, yeah. And even Newcastle don't have a depth like that. You look at the likes of Kieran Trippier, who's still being played, even with the likes of Lewis Hall on the bench. Trippier is still playing ahead of him, and that's because Eddie Howe doesn't trust his bench, whereas Unai Emery, you see him make multiple substitutions throughout a game, and I think that's because he is able to trust his bench. Now, granted, yes, Eddie Howe has a lot of injuries, but I just think that perhaps if you do compare the squads, I think Aston Villa do have just a slightly better squad, and I think many people would agree with that, because at the start of the season, a lot of people would have put Aston Villa high up, like the likes of Gary Neville put Aston Villa 5th in the predictions. I didn't even put them high up. And I'm a person that did doubt Aston Villa at the start of the season. I think I put them 9th or 8th. I put them with Brighton. But right now, I do think they can finish 100% in the top 4. the way they're playing, I think momentum will just carry them through with it. And I'd be very surprised if they would finish outside the top 6, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the top 4...
bank on them getting Europe.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whether winning the Conference League or finishing in the top 7.
Yeah, and I do think that they would definitely finish in top 4. I think top 4 is definitely a good place.
Well, even if they finish top 5, they could still get
Champions League. Yeah, it's a good shout. That's the thing. So I think that there's definitely a good chance for Villa to get Champions League football next year. I think many people might think I'm crazy saying that at this stage of the season, but trust me, it just feels like a Newcastle season like last year where momentum just carried them through. And if they have, like you said, if they have no injuries though, then very few, they can go gliding past win after win after win. You know, they've beaten Man City and Arsenal in the same week. I mean, that is fantastic. And within the space of 2 weeks, they've beaten Tottenham as well, which I know Tottenham have got a lot of injuries, but they've still beaten them.
Like, they're still churning out results. They're not. I know they will get tired, but you're still seeing John McGinn, Ollie Watkins, Douglas Luiz. All these sort of players are playing regularly, putting in good performances. Like Leon Bailey put brilliant performance against City, and then another good one against Arsenal. So.
And I think Unai Emery as well is a genius manager. And I think as much as a Tottenham fan, I don't particularly like him. But I do think you have to acknowledge genius, and Unai Emery is an absolute genius in the way he's playing. With this high line that Villa have got out, like I said, they've caught their opponents off 74 times, and that is
ridiculous, isn't it? Because they don't have an abundance of pace back there.
No, that's the thing, and it's a staggering amount compared to second, who is Tottenham, who is 52, I think, if I remember rightly.
You seem to play on the halfway line when you watch the team.
Exactly. I mean, you see the way we play when we have 9 men, and Aston Villa have caught almost, in fact, over 20 more offsides than Tottenham have. So it goes to show you how good this high line is, and I think this high line could be possibly duplicated by other teams because how well it's going. I mean, you saw Arsenal got caught offside multiple times. There's multiple times where Aston Villa would just push up and catch them offside. If they were just a tiny bit deeper, Arsenal have been through constantly, but that's just down to the little margins that Unai Emery is getting correct. And that is what Unai Emery is perfect at. Those little fine details in football and the sort of the tactics, Unai Emery is great at, and that is why he's beaten Pep and Arteta in the same week.
Well, I think there is a good thing going forward that Arsenal, Liverpool and City maybe don't look at the same level they have in previous seasons. Yes, Liverpool have improved upon last year, but they still don't look like their title-winning form of a few years ago. City have had a drop-off, and even Arsenal don't look as good as last season, so that will go in Villa's favour. However, the one thing that may not go in Villa's favour, which may seem a bit silly to say because they're playing so well at the moment in the league, but Unai Emery traditionally doesn't do as well in the league as he does in Europe or in Cups.
And that is why I originally put him low in my league position, because I always thought they were going to win the Conference League. And I did put them, domestically, I did put them quite low. But Unai Emery actually has one of the best records this calendar year. His record this calendar year is amazing. It's fantastic. The fact that he took Aston Villa from, relegation, genuinely relegation. And I know they didn't have a relegated squad, but that's where they were. And so the players are obviously going to be on a down. The mentality's not going to be there. And Unai Emery has just took them, got them into Europe, and is now pushing into the top 3, which is ridiculous from Unai Emery. You know, they're currently above Manchester City. And I just think there's, right now, with the form that they're in and the momentum that Aston Villa are in right now, there's very little teams that can stop them. And we've seen arguably the 2 best teams in the country, one of them definitely being the best team in the country in Manchester City, and the other being Arsenal, who many would say is the second best team right now. They finished second last year, and they've strengthened. Both teams are strengthened. And yet, Unai Emery is now turning out results against them. I mean, it's fantastic to see, and I think that is why Aston Villa can have the sort of the potential to push on and perhaps fight. Not win the title, I'm not saying win the title, but perhaps be in and around there, be in amongst there.
So you think even though Unai Emery traditionally doesn't do as well in the league as he does in Europe, and because Villa's squad isn't as deep as the others, you still think they can push the season? Is that what you're going to say? You think they'll get like a bit of injuries?
This would be a bold
Conference League won't take too much out of them?
It could, and that is what I'm worried for when it comes to Aston Villa. That's my only concern. If they didn't have Conference League, I'd be absolutely confident that they'd probably be finishing the top 4 because they've got nothing stopping them then. But right now, Conference League is the only thing that I'd say
Thursday, Sunday.
That's the only thing that I would say is a bit of a detriment. But then when it comes to January, there's no Conference League football at all, and they are going to finish top in their group, if I remember rightly. So there's no Conference League football until end of February, start of March.
So that's when they can really
almost 2 months
build upon, get points on the board. Yeah. So if they do drop off later in the season, it won't be
as a detriment. No. And that's the thing. You saw Newcastle do it. They churned out results in January and February. But then towards the back end of the season, they were, I mean, this is where they had New York, but they were like sort of, you know, I remember they drew to Bournemouth and they went on like a 5-game streak of not winning. I think they drew like 4 or something. It's ridiculous. But because of their results previously, they still managed to get top 4. And I think Villa have that right now. And as much as I say they can be title contenders, I do think they can be in and around there. I think they can just be, like you said, the best of the rest. And I think that they are a team to look out for. They're not going to be any mugs. They're not going to be any pushovers. No. And I think they'd definitely be a banana skin, as we've already seen for the title contending team, like the proper big teams.
Because Liverpool, we still got to go to Villa Park, and although our record against Villa isn't awful, like we've made them look like a load of rubbish earlier on in the season when we beat them 3-0 at Anfield. Going to Villa Park, it's a different ball game.
Yeah.
The team's picked up form post that result, because the first few games of the season, we saw them get pumped at Newcastle. They came to Anfield and they got pumped as well. And they were just sort of finding their feet. And everyone was thinking, are Villa really what
when
people
they got
made them out
pumped
to
at
be?
Newcastle, I thought that.
Well, that was opening day, but
it was,
it was the first few weeks of the season. Everyone thought, are Villa as good as everyone said?
Yeah.
But then once they got their rhythm going, players scoring, and look at like John McGinn. I've always rated John McGinn.
One of the best midfielders in the league at the moment.
Yeah,
he's better than he ever was. He's one of the best midfielders in the Premier League.
Well,
right now.
he's got the ultimate sort of skill set. He can run his ass off.
Yeah.
He's got an excellent work ethic. He's got a brilliant left foot. He gets himself about.
Good technically.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
like he doesn't look like a technical player. He just looks like a guy who just be a brute.
Runs in and
exactly. But he's got that mentality of just winning the ball back, pressing high up the pitch. He's clever as well when and when not to press. He can drift out wide, play centrally, and obviously score goals as we've seen.
And that's down to the excellence of Unai Emery as well. Unai Emery has improved a lot of players. All these players, that a lot of them look like outcasts to the club as well. And Unai Emery's come in and completely changed the game for Aston Villa.
Well, even like Watkins has gone up a whole other level.
Yeah.
I always thought he was a good striker, but he missed a lot of easy chances. Over the last, 12 months was
one of the best strikers in the league as well.
I think I read a stat the other day, I don't know if it's changed, but apart from Haaland and Salah, he had the most goals or most goal contributions.
Yeah.
From when Emery was appointed until that point in the season. And that just shows you the quality of him, because, like I said, he was a bit hit or miss, and now he just looks like the real deal, doesn't he?
And I also think that is what helps Unai Emery as well. The likes of Ollie Watkins and that in form, and the fact that they can carry the momentum as well. And no one expects anything of them. If Aston Villa finished 7th, for example, right now,
everyone would go.
People would be like, well, yes, there's a little bit of a drop off. But it's what we expected. Even 8th, they'd be like, well, a little bit of a drop off.
Yeah, but if they finish 7th or 8th, people would expect as well if they go far in the Conference League or win it. Because obviously they'll be like, well, you can make a case. But if they get knocked out of the Conference League early, I really think Villa will fourth spot them their own. Unless Newcastle, the players come back from Newcastle, they get knocked out of the Champions League and they just go on a run. Or you, because a lot of people are starting to write off Tottenham because they've had so many injuries. But you're a Tottenham fan yourself, you know. And we saw at the start of the season, it was so good, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I always, even at the start of the season, I always has been saying that we would probably finish 5th. I don't think we'd finish the top 4. I didn't get carried away myself because I knew about our squad. I didn't predict this amount of an injury crisis, but I knew that we'd get injuries, and Maddison does have injury issues. I didn't think someone like Van de Ven would get injured, but I just knew that our squad would become thinner due to injuries. And that is why I'm not really surprised at the drop-off we got. But I've always been consistent, even when we were good, and now that we will finish 5th. I think we will finish 5th. And that arguably is enough to get Champions League football, but if not Europa League football, that's a successful season for us as well.
Always building upon something, isn't it?
Exactly, and it's Andrew's first season, so he's still sort of developing. Unai Emery's, he's already had almost one season. This is almost his second season in a way.
He's just been there over a year now, isn't
he? Exactly, and that's the thing. So I think he's had a lot of time to have these players, bedded in, and the fact that he's done it this quick as well, because these players have been on form since last season, got them into Europe. The fact that he's done that is crazy. It's ridiculous, and it goes to show how much of a genius Unai Emery is. Because I think he's slightly underrated in a way. I don't think people mainly think of him as the top managers in the league, but he arguably is. You got the likes of Pep, Arteta, Klopp, but Unai Emery's got a better resume than Arteta, so you could make a case.
And when you look at him at Villarreal, he beat Arteta's Arsenal side on the way to the final, exactly. And he beat United in the final, and then in the Champions League 2 seasons ago, beat Bayern Munich. He gave Liverpool I thought, Villarreal was an easy sort of opponent, something
almost
you want.
Did one of the greatest comebacks we've seen.
I know, when they were sort of playing in that first half, you thought, they can play good football here. And obviously his record at Sevilla was just phenomenal, winning 3 Europa Leagues on the bounce. So
crazy.
He's good, and I think he's a very good manager, and he's won a lot of trophies throughout his career at clubs that are maybe not the biggest. But the only slight critique you can have with Unai Emery, because obviously his Arsenal stint wasn't very good, if he does make that next step up after Villa, say he does go to a Man United, a Chelsea,
I don't fancy him then.
Real Madrid, Barcelona, will he be able to perform in the same way?
I don't fancy him then. I think the pressure's just different, and you saw how he performed at Arsenal. He wasn't the best at Arsenal. Perhaps you could say they could have given him time, but he lost the dressing room. You could see that the way they were playing. They were shocking. They were. But
they did have a lot of bad eggs in that Arsenal team.
They did, but they were scoring a lot of them were his signings anyway.
Yeah.
And they were scoring last minute goals against Southampton and celebrating they won the league, and that's Unai Emery's Arsenal for you. So, but then this Aston Villa team, mate, Unai Emery's Aston Villa is completely different gravy. They're going mental because they're beating Man City and Arsenal. They're best players, the 2 best teams in the league, sorry. So that's the thing, I think it's a different sort of gravy when you come to a big club and you go to a smaller club like Villa, and that's why I think being at Villa is just a massive sort of bonus to Unai Emery. If he was doing this with like an Arsenal or Man United, sounds crazy, but I wouldn't fancy him as much just because the pressure is different. Yeah. When you got that team like Aston Villa, like I was saying earlier, if they finish 7th, it doesn't matter. If they finish 8th, it doesn't matter. That's the thing. So they got nothing to lose. So why not go for it? Why not go all out for it? And like you said, if they do get knocked out in the Conference League early, which I wouldn't predict it, but it could happen. You never know. There might be a shock exit. I'd absolutely fancy Villa to really push on, get that top 4 place, absolutely, and possibly just being around, like just a little bit off that top 3. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they do carry on like the way they are now. They might just be off, like slightly off 3rd, possibly even fighting for that. Depends how the season plans out, really.
So as you can see, there are many variables which can affect Villa's season. Unai Emery himself, the form of the Arsenal, City and Liverpool, and injuries and the Conference League. What do you think would be the biggest effect on Villa? Do you reckon they'll just glide through the Conference League, glide into top 4, or do you reckon the Conference League will halt them? Do you reckon it will cause injuries? Do you reckon it will cause tired players? And will they sustain that brilliant home form at the moment? And obviously, will Liverpool, Arsenal and City, if they do start to pick up form, will that just sort of put Villa out of the equation altogether?
It's sort of a 50-50 with Aston Villa. They could get injuries, they might not, and that sort of just...
Exactly. It's all if buts and maybes. Like, for example, Salah's leaving Liverpool to go to AFCON in January, and that could obviously affect Liverpool. At least Villa don't have any of those sort of players at their top level, like the likes of Watkins, Douglas Luiz, John McGinn, who are going to be disappearing off to play in various tournaments. So
exactly.
It all bodes well for Villa, and it's a lot of if, buts and maybes, and we really could see them do well this season.
Yeah, for sure.